Iran says it just hit 3 American military bases in 1 week. Not 1, 3. Bahrain, Jordan, and Kuwait. All in the same stretch of days. And according to Iran's own state media, the attacks weren't random, they were numbered. Phase 21. Phase 22. Part of something Tehran is calling an ongoing operation, with its own name, its own press releases, and its own claimed body count of destroyed equipment. Here's the problem. Almost none of it has been confirmed. Not by the Pentagon. Not by CENTCOM. Not by the governments hosting those bases. What we have instead is a pattern siren sounding in Manama, warnings issued to residents, explosions reported by wire journalists on the ground, and a stream of statements from Iran's Public Relations Office describing damage that no outside camera has verified. So what actually happened this week? And why does it matter whether Iran's claims are true or exaggerated? Let's go through it. To understand why Iranian drones are allegedly flying at U.S. bases in the Gulf, you have to back up a few weeks. The United States and Iran are in the middle of an active, direct military exchange. This isn't a proxy war fought through militias anymore. U.S. Central Command has confirmed it carried out strikes inside Iranian territory on 13 consecutive nights, hitting what it describes as command centers, drone storage sites, communication networks, and coastal surveillance infrastructure. Iran, in turn, says it's answering those strikes with retaliation of its own, aimed specifically at the U.S. bases that sit closest to its borders. That means Kuwait. That means Bahrain, home to the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet. And that means Jordan, where American forces have operated for years alongside coalition partners. This is where the story gets serious. According to Pentagon officials, at least 4 American service members have been killed in the most recent wave of Iranian attacks. 3 of them died in Jordan. 1 was killed during a controlled detonation of an Iranian drone in Iraq. That's not a claim. That's a confirmed loss of American life. Let's lay out what's actually documented in order. For nearly 2 weeks, U.S. strikes on Iran have continued nightly. CENTCOM has publicly acknowledged this campaign, releasing footage of strikes on what it calls Iranian military infrastructure. In response, Iran's army announced what it labeled the 21st phase of its retaliation operation, a swarm of what it called kamikaze drones aimed at ammunition depots and logistics facilities at a major U.S. staging base in western Kuwait. Days later came Phase 22. This time, the target was described as a base in Jordan, specifically personnel housing and equipment storage, along with aircraft maintenance hangars at Sheikh Isa Air Base in Bahrain. Then separately on a Friday morning local time, air raid sirens sounded across Bahrain. Bahrain's own Interior Ministry posted a public warning telling residents to seek shelter. An Associated Press journalist on the ground reported hearing an explosion. Iran's state broadcaster released video it says shows drones launching toward Bahrain and Jordan that same morning. Notice what's missing from that timeline. At no point does a U.S. or host nation official confirm that Iranian drones actually struck their intended targets, or that the damage described by Tehran actually occurred. Here's where this story requires some caution. Iran's claims come almost entirely from one source, Iran's own military public relations office, echoed by state-run outlets. The drone footage released by Iranian state broadcasting shows aircraft launching, but independent journalists covering the war say it's unclear exactly when or where that footage was actually filmed. CNN has been blunt about this gap, stating plainly that it cannot independently verify Iran's version of events. The Pentagon, for its part, has released only limited information about the attacks it acknowledges happened. That doesn't mean nothing happened. Sirens went off. An explosion was heard. Foreign governments issued travel warnings telling their citizens to avoid all but essential travel to Bahrain and Kuwait. Those are real, observable facts, separate from Iran's own narrative. But there's a wide gap between explosions were reported near a U.S. base, and we destroyed the fuel tanks, warehouses, and barracks, which is the specific language Iran's army has used in its statements. That second part, the scale of destruction, is coming from one side of the conflict and one side only. When a military calls something a large swarm of kamikaze drones, or references a named, multi-phase operation, that's not neutral reporting. That's messaging. Here's the plain English version. A kamikaze drone, sometimes called a loitering munition, is essentially a small aircraft packed with explosives that crashes into its target and detonates on impact. Cheaper than a missile, harder to shoot down in large number.